Whenever you're ready.
I think we need to tell people. Young people forget. They're not told. You need to tell them.
Yeah, you're right. You know, they tell me to keep quiet because I keep on going. So I don't know if I'm going to give the right stuff or not. So,
You want to tilt them up a little? You know, that's, yeah, it's got to be tilted up a little, I think, for, as opposed to Mary's, you know? A little bit down more. I don't know what your viewfinder has. I'm looking at the monitor. I shouldn't do that.
Who's running the camera?
I don't know. Just bop me over the head, Wade. It's okay. It's okay.
Whenever you're ready.
All right. It's brilliant. Okay, Anthony, would you just give us your name?
okay. My name is Anthony Gabriel, born and raised in Little Falls, left for the military from Little Falls. Since then, I've lived in Herkimer County in the village of Herkimer, and my military career started after my high school days. Needed a job, as most young fellows do. Once I completed school, didn't have the money to go to college. I had the brains, but not the money or someone to push me. At that time, we didn't have the counseling service or whatever. So I joined the service, prompted by my 4 brothers who preceded me, Navy men and Army men, including my dad, who's a World War I veteran himself. And they, in turn, I was real proud of all of them because a total of 76 years of active service in my family. So we don't consider ourselves a military family. We're just by circumstance and whatever. No one was drafted. They all enlisted. And I figure I was pretty sharp because by the time I decided to join, I hesitated too. You're 18 years old. You're not crazy about going away for 3 years and joining the Army. But I knew my general orders. I knew all the ranks. I knew what they were going to ask you, what they figured. So I figured I'd give it a try, and I did. I joined November 17, 1948. I joined the Army after a very successful high school career, and went to Camp Pickett, Virginia. Took basic training there with the 17th Airborne, and there I had a big eye-opening experience. Small-town kid goes into the service, and all of a sudden you're thrown up against rednecks, prejudice that exists. You never worked with too many. We only had one black student in our whole community. All of a sudden you're thrown into 250 people from every walks of life, thieves or whatever. Some of them were sent there by judges, some of them were volunteers. So you had, this transition period is horrendous. And for any young person that decides to go into the service, you want to face this. You're going to run into things you've never seen in your life. So we lived through that. You meet many friends, many comrades, sometime lasting for a lifetime. Then after your basic training, you're usually sent to some camp for some profession you're going to continue on. Some went to leadership school, some went mechanic schools and things like this. I was fortunate enough. I wanted to go into the cavalry. I wanted to go into the armored. They said, no, you're going to go infantry, and that's where I went. So I was shipped to Europe, and I hit post-war Europe, Reconstruction, displaced persons, survivors of the Holocaust. I was one of the youngest soldiers in the battalion that I joined, the 1st Infantry Division, and down into the mountains. And you had a soldier. You weren't even accepted into the norm of a company level or battalion level. They kept you in the basement of the barracks at that time, old German converted barracks that we lived in, and they were a spit and polish. And once I was accepted, they let me move upstairs. I became a gunner for a 57 millimeter recoilless weapon, and it was beautiful. But here again, everything was hard training, 24 hours a day. We had alerts, always worrying about the Russians on the border, always worrying about this happening and that happening. So you didn't have too much time. We maneuvered at that time constantly all over Europe. 9 months out of the year, we were in the field. And I very seldom ever saw my beautiful in-house barracks bed and wall locker and the comforts and everything. So it was an experience. But I did meet some of the best. Working with displaced persons and working with Holocaust survivors. I got so many personal stories of one-on-one that bring tears to your eyes, and those that feel that the Holocaust didn't take place, 100% wrong. I had the opportunity to visit the Dachau concentration camp, and it's an eye-opener. And that was just a few years later, after the war. And I was fortunate enough to be assigned to the 18th Infantry, whose mission was to guard the Germans who were involved in the going for the Nuremberg trial. Hermann Goering was there. Dachau was the prison that held them, and eventually they moved them all up to Nuremberg. And I, being the youngest one, they said, "You're not going to go up there and pull guard. You're going to go down in the mountains and keep on training." So, but I did meet many people. Met the burgomaster of Dachau, the assistant burgomaster, number 2 man who told us his personal story on how the military came in at that time and took him out of bed and put him in military clothes and had to take him to the concentration camp where 268,000 people were cremated, murdered, and whatever. So it's something that stuck in my mind as a young fella, 18 years old. You're never exposed to these things. You've seen construction, destruction. You've seen hunger, starvation. Most of these people lived on nothing. Transition period was difficult. But the soldiers, there was always this fraternization that took place, which was forbidden. We were always written up by the various writers. You know, you can't do this, you can't do that. But we did it anyway. Some got caught and some didn't. We always had the tension of the Fulton border with the Russians worrying about coming back in. We trained hard, but while I was there, I was fortunate enough, I competed to win a position on the drill team for the 1st Infantry Division. There was a 40-man team. You had to compete by company, by battalion, by regiment, and they ended up with 40 people, and we won first place. So they held you a little high esteem. If you were a competitor, you fit in good. We had commanders who admired the boxers and defended them. They weren't show people. They were people who backed you up. If you had leadership qualities, they said, "I want you to go to West Point. I want you to go to OCS. I want you to go to non-commissioned officer school." And you either liked it or you didn't like it. I chose to go the leadership route. I had so many bad non-commissioned officers, so many bad leftover officers. I had been misused. I know what it's like to have walking pneumonia, be carried out into the company square with the rain, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. When you have a permission slip, you don't have to perform any duties. I had walking pneumonia, get picked up, get hit 4 times. And I promised this sergeant, I said, if I have to stay in this man's army 20 years, that's one of my better stories, I will get you. It's not a threat, it's a promise. And as God had his way, 6 years later, I did run across this non-commissioned officer who came back from Europe, one of the best NCOs I ever had in my life after we had the understanding. And I was now no longer a little buck private, but I was an officer, and I got that straightened out. And my one thing is, I never wanted to see a man misused, abused. And the old Army did this. They beat you up. I went through the transition period, black and white. I was refused service every time I traveled in the South. You're in the nigger line. Get out. You don't belong here. We don't serve whites here. We don't serve blacks. We don't serve this. And this is where we're going from brown shoe army to black shoe army. This is where segregation was starting to break down. And it's a horrendous hell of a feeling when you're just one of thousands. So you didn't know. We had fights. We had many things. But it took several years for this thing to work out. But we met many good friends. I did manage, as they say, to meet some of the best Germans. I went to the big music houses in Munich. Bruno Walter was one of the famous conductors that Hitler chased away 25, 30 years before, and I had the opportunity to listen to him perform that night. And that was a night I opened my eyes. I didn't believe there were so many rich Germans with jewels and gowns and things like this. These are things that you don't see. As I used to tell my buddies, you got 2 choices. You can run down the back alleys, chase the girls, hit every gas house you want, and see nothing for your 3 years. Or you can go to these places, see the best that the world has to offer. You have a chance to see some of the 7 wonders of the world and do this. This was one of my my things. I always wanted to travel and see these things I used to read about in the books. And I had the opportunity. There I was. But I had to do it myself. So
Sounds
I
like
met many friends.
you had the good and the bad. It sounds like a very
I've seen
situation.
from the very worst. I've heard stories that would turn your hair from the Holocaust survivors that we worked with. They had worked in our kitchens.
I really want to hit on those stories. I
Okay.
think that those are the difficult stories.
They are.
But those are the stories that people really need to know.
Oh, yeah.
They can see what you came into. They can see the
Yeah.
fruit of your labor at home, but they can't see that.
Yeah, they've never
Could you
seen it.
share with me a story that you think people should know, even if it's a hard story?
Yeah. Well, it's coming near Mother's Day. There was a situation in downtown Bad Tolz, Germany, when I was sitting here again. I was just a little buck private at that time, and a German kid. The black market was going heavy. You could make good money on the black market with a pack of cigarettes or a carton of cigarettes. You can get a $20 bill, cost you $1. So a lot of people involved in this, and I didn't. But the young fella came up to me and he said, "GI, would you buy me some chocolates?" I said, "What are you, out of your mind?" I says, "I'll get arrested. I can't buy you chocolates and give it to you. I'll get court-martialed." He says, "Well, I know." He says, "But what are you going to do with the chocolates, just for kicks?" He says, "I want to give it to my mother for Mother's Day." I said, "Why would you give your mother American chocolates for Mother's Day?" He says, "This is the only gift that I could give her." He says, "My mother was German. My father was Jew." And he said, "I put 3.5 years in a concentration camp." This kid was just 16 and a half years old. He said, "I put 3.5 years in a concentration camp. My father died. My brother survived. I survived. My mother's sick now and she's dying." He says, "I want to give her a gift." He says, "Do you believe my story?" I said, "Not a bit. I don't believe your story a bit." So I went into the commissary. When I went in there, as I'm going around the chocolate section, I says, "Geez, you know what? It could be your own mother. It could be a situation like this." And I did. I bought 2 boxes of candy. I broke the law. Went out there and I said, "I'm going to sit here at this bench. When I leave, what's there is yours." I walked away. I didn't sell it to him. I gave him, "Enjoy yourself." So I felt I did something good because I was homesick too. I had 2 other brothers in the Army in Germany at the same time in the division. So we very seldom had a chance to get together, but we did meet occasionally. And it was enlightening. Went into Italy, traveled. One brother came from Austria, one from northern part of Germany. And there are several stories. I met people beyond. I met German soldiers after the war was over with. They were in a peacetime status. I worked for the Troop Information Education section of the military for the 1st Infantry Division. I had to hire teachers, civilian teachers, to teach the GIs basic reading, writing, and arithmetic. And it was very enlightening. I met some of the best teachers. I met a Dr. Gunda Zaida, his name was. He was the developer for the black fly disease they had and studied in North Africa. And here was a fellow teaching 4th and 5th grade mathematics for the classes. So I had a chance to mix with the best from the top to the bottom. I was never sorry. They were good friends. They were human beings. And the transition is terrible. One day he's your enemy. The next day he's your friend or your employee. So that went very smooth. I came back to the United States, went to different camps, Fort Dix, for leadership school, 16 weeks. Here again, constantly training. At that time, the war was just starting to brew in the Far East. And from there, I went on to Fort Riley, Kansas for 6 months. And here again, then the war did start. All my friends that were in the infantry division with me in Germany were now shipped back home, given 10 days leave, boom, went to the Far East. These are people I've...
For a second,
Go ahead.
because I'm trying to get clear what
Okay.
progression you took.
All right.
If you had to just tell me, I went from here to there, to there,
Yeah.
to there, back, so that we can let people know, look at this, look at how broad this is,
Yeah.
very simply where you have been.
All right. I just came back from Europe now. I'm coming back to the United States, going to school internally in the United States. And all my friends that were with me in Europe were supposed to finish their time, were extended under the Truman year. You know, you can join the Army and you think you're all done when your time is up. They passed a law. Harry Truman added one more year onto everybody. Well, these people that came back were shipped home, given a quick leave, shipped to Korea. Most of them were killed. Most of them I read on a repatriation list where they were taken prisoners, and some survived that came back. Most of my old sergeants came back that way. Many of them were killed. That's the sad part about being in the military. Those people that you have trained with and loved over the time and worked with are no longer with you because of the situation. They're killed. And you hear about it through a friend, through a friend, through a friend, or you read it in the Army Times. The Army is very meticulous. They do list all this stuff. Then from there, I graduated from officer candidate school, what they call branching material, so they send you to an infantry branch. Here again, I was back there at Fort Benning, Georgia, and I was then sent to Fort Rucker, Alabama, an old Army post that they opened up, just loaded with snakes from years back, and we trained thousands of GIs there. And we were short. We didn't have non-commissioned officers. Sometimes we had our highest field person was a corporal, sometime a PFC. And I was only a lieutenant myself at that time. And we fought for people. The training was difficult. We shipped out 2,000 men in 1 week after they graduated. Then we'd go through 8-week cycle. We would transfer 5,000 men. Training was horrendous. And this is where they went. And
About what point of the war was that when you
now
were?
that was just about 1951, the end of 1951. I was fortunate enough, I say later on, you'll run across Sergeant George Cliccia over here, who walked into one of the first returnees from Korea, walked into my office in Alabama, and I served with several people in the area who were still in the business, like Keith Davey, he was down there with the 94th Tank Battalion, and we met. And those of us that knew each other from the civilian days had dinner together at different clubs, and we're associated. And there was, like I say, the camaraderie always exists. You're never far away, that you're always within reach, and they remember you, even as years go by. Then from there, I went to Germany, went to Korea myself. And when I got over there, I flew. They sent them by ship and plane. I was fortunate. I flew from California to Wake Island, to Hawaii, to Wake Island, to Tachikawa Air Force Base in Japan. Then from there, they put you in a replacement depot. This is what happens. When everybody comes into an area, they go into a replacement depot. All the units that are fighting on the line have a request. We have so many men killed. We have to replace so many men. This is being realistic how it's done. Okay? You 4 men here go to the 1st Cavalry. You 5 men go to 24th. They put your name on the list every day. So you have a few days to see the town, which I did. We were in downtown Tokyo for a little while. We saw Tokyo like you should ever see it. Compliments to the military air transport service girls who worked for U.S. Air at that time. Met us when they had their half a day off, and they took us through the whole works and showed us every temple, every this, every that, and every this. Of course, on our own, we found the geisha houses and everything else, but we saw it like you should see it. So then I was pulled, finally, after 3 days, I was pulled. It was nothing to see 1,000 men on the field at 2 o'clock in the morning. He said, following named troops fall out over here. Here they get their assignments. That's how they go. It's unfortunate because the people that I left on the field at their replacement depot were those who were killed in Porch Uphill, Old Baldy, some of the most severe battles they had. I was fortunate, as God would have his way. I was sent with a 21-man team special task force to southern Japan, a place called Itajima. It was a Japanese Naval Academy. Great big gun looking over the harbor. Stayed 3 weeks. I learned chemical, biological, radiological warfare, something I hated with a passion, but I learned well. I was hoping they would never use this. We heard on the line that the Chinese were using this, so everyone was trained, even United States and Europe or wherever. And I was well trained. When it came time to go back to the replacement depot to go assigned to the 1st Cavalry, Again, freak of nature, the tunnels were flooded. Couldn't get back, so they kept us there another week. We had the best instructors in the world come from the United States. We handled cobalt by the handles. We went into cribbed in areas where biological samples were spread all over, handled mustard gas, the whole works. And I prayed to never use this type of warfare. And God, it was good. It didn't take place. Then from there, went to Korea, shipped out. I was given an assignment to an amphibious brigade, amphibious engineer brigade, excuse me. And their mission was to supply lumber, vehicles, materials, equipment, and everything. They were scattered in about 50 miles north of Busan. And the first day we landed there, I had a sign for it. As an officer, you have to take over command sometime. They release someone and you become the commander. I was signing for equipment as they're swinging it off. And this is one of the bad parts of being the leader. You've got to handle all the responsibility. It was enlightening. I wasn't on the shore 20 minutes, 10 miles down the road, and we got our first encounter with firing. But it wasn't from the enemy. It was not from the North Koreans or South Koreans. It was from the thieves, the bandits. Now in Korea, banditry, thievery has existed for centuries. And you get your indoctrination courses, they tell you, don't fire back. Let them go up to the vehicles. Here again, the State Department rules. Let them take what they want and then go on your way. And this is what we had to do. I said, this is ridiculous. So anyway, we set up in a compound where Sigmund Rhee had just released 1,000 prisoners, turned them loose all over the mountainside.
How old were you at that time?
And I was 20 years old. And here again, the transition, new cultures, new people, new hatreds. The Asians didn't like this, and Japanese didn't like the Koreans, Koreans didn't like the Chinese, Chinese didn't like the Mongolians. So this was a transition. You get an education as you grow, as you survive. And then the war was starting to wind down a few months later. And I had an opportunity to meet some of the boys from my hometown that were within driving distance. We got a chance to see each other every once in a while on the weekend. One of them became the famous mayor of Little Falls for 27 years. He's still in there. But it was enlightening. And our mission there was to provide supplies, barbed wire, vehicle repair, maintenance battalions. We had a Swedish medical hospital with us. We had a Turkish group with us for security. So you get a chance to see how the rest of the world works. And believe me, some of these other armies are tough. You think the American Army is tough, don't ever join the Turkish Army. Because they don't have a fence around their compounds. They have a little wire 4 inches off the ground. That's to keep you out rather than let you in. And they're very hard to discipline. It's nothing. I won't even go into it publicly and say how the one NCO was disciplined for not, but it was common to watch them inspection in ranks, contrary to the way the Americans did it. When he grabbed a rifle, he found that rifle dirty. As he looked down the barrel, it was nothing to have that white rifle wrapped right around his head, pounded right into the ground, passed out cold. This is what you see in the foreign armies. So I thank God every day for seeing that American flag. Every time I got up in the morning, it was there. And I knew that when this is over with, I'm going to go back. I'm one of them. This is my country. That's where I'm going. So as the war finally did wind down, Panmunjom took place. I came back to the United States. Big transition, reduction of forces. So I got out and I joined the reserve, the lifetime reservists. And I joined several units here. I got married, raised a family, had half a dozen kids.
How much of this have you shared with your half a dozen kids?
All of them. They know everything I did except the women I ran around with, contrary to what, and I think may even know about some of those, but it was good. I told them the way life was. I had a daughter go back to Germany 17 years later. She said, Dad, I'm going to see Dachau concentration camp. What should I look for? She did everything I told her on that piece of paper. Took my final trail all the way through. Then she went to Japan years later, did the same thing, whatever trail I had. So I have a good bunch of kids that follow me, but they were supportive all the time. I put many years in the reserve. This is how I got I had over 12 years of active duty running, and I ended up with 36 years of active duty. And my family was very supportive of me. Every place I went in the United States, I always took them. I took them north and south. I took them to cotton fields. I took them to the beaches. I took them to watermelon patches, so they got an education.
What kind of residual effects did this have, do you think, on you and your family? You've told them what you wanted to tell them.
Mm-hmm.
But what kinds of things do you think affected you to make you the kind of husband, father, new civilian that you had become?
Yeah, I was Joe civilian, but I still had that military hold, you know. And I taught them everything I knew. When you had 6 girls, I raised them like 6 boys. They were tough. They think like I do. I give them my rationale. When I do something, I tried to impress them. This is why I'm doing this. This is why, and we are very open. We sit down, we discuss politics, we discuss everything, and they make their own decisions. And if I think it's a wrong decision, of course, I'm going to try to change them. But they're their own person, and I get every young man. I'm always proud, and I'm proud of the time I put in, the time I served. And when I walked away, I gave it my best. I have no regrets. I would do it again. And I'll say this for the American kid. Nobody ever defends this guy. Long-haired hippie. We got rings in his nose, rings in his ears, rings in whatever else. But I'll say this. The American kid, I'll put the American kid up against any army in the world. You can treat him night and day. You could beat him into the ground. You could run him from morning till night. That's all he asks, that you treat him fair. And when you do treat this kid fair, when the chips are down, he comes through 100%. You don't even have to be there. He's the greatest guy in the world. We've beaten them all. We've beaten the Japanese, the Italians, the Germans, the Russians, anybody else you want to throw against us. Crazy little American kid. Push him back in the corner, he fights like a wildcat. He's one of the best. I got a lot of confidence in young kids. A lot of them don't have this. You know, that's all they see, the hippie image. When that kid gets off active duty, if he wants to put on a wig, if he wants to wear rings, if he wants to do what he wants, fine. That's part of life. This is their generation to do this. Over the years, I've seen the transitions take place, but the kid has never changed. He's always been the good, solid American kid that you can count on 100%. When the chips are down, you say, I need. He said, when do you want it? That's all they ask. And I'm proud of them. I tell you. So.
I have to, now I was not there, and if I have to tell my children about the horror of Dhaka or any of it,
Okay, sure.
what do I need to tell them?
You need to tell them that there was a time in history when the people were misused, where there were those who wanted to eliminate an entire culture, wanted to eliminate an entire generation, an entire race. But they deserved to live like anybody else. They were mistreated. They couldn't fight back. And when they did fight back, they were eliminated, annihilated, but it did take place. And it was up to us, the stronger ones, as it is today, to have to go to their aid. This is what we're doing today. We're pulling police duty all over the world. This is our job.
How did you deal with that awful exposure? I mean, let's face it, you were 19, 20 years old, and this horror hit you in the face. You're coming from America.
Yeah.
It isn't there. How did you deal with it?
It opens your eyes. It makes you appreciative of where you came from. It makes you appreciative of the way you were raised. And my father, being an immigrant, coming from Italy, was thrown back into World War I a year and a half after he got here. And he always told me, he says, war is bad. And I think Tecumseh Sherman, he said, hey, war is hell. You young people out here think it's the greatest thing in glory, but it's not. It is hell. And I learned from my father. He cried. When World War II started, I know where I was at that time, December 7th. My father was crying at the table because he knew he had 4 sons, possibly 5, that had to go. And there's the worst thing could happen. We watched all this take. Not getting political, but today we have the bad situation again. Do we sit back? Are we exposed to this? We have pros and cons. It's a difficult question.
How much did you cry?
I cried a lot. This is one thing, I'm glad you brought that up. It's a phrase I haven't heard in years. My father always used to challenge all the boys. He says, "You're a wise guy, huh? You tough?" He says, "Someday you're going to cry by yourself." And you know, when I got back from Europe, the first thing he said to me, because now went from enlisted to officer, I was now a little gentleman, well trained. He says, "Tony, did you ever cry?" I said, "No, Pa." He says, "You're lying like hell." And he was right. I didn't have the guts to tell him he was right 100% of the time. I cried many times. You see a lot of things you're sorry for. I used to buy flowers on Mother's Day for a little old German lady that lost 4 sons in Betholz. Worked in our NCO club at that time, mopping floors. Every time I went in, she used to dust me off, sweep me down, take my jacket and coat. Couldn't speak a word of English. Come Mother's Day, I felt it was my job to give her a bunch of flowers. She cried too. And I didn't cry. This is it. You're still human. You still meet some of the best people in the world. We're still friends. I've gone back, visit my brother who's a retired military man also in California. 50 years, 52 years. I went back to see him 2 years ago, and sitting at the very desk, in his table rather, in Anaheim, California, were 4 widows for 4 German girls who had married GIs that I had known in Germany at that time in Bamberg, that we partied together. It's ironic. 4 of them. Of course, my brother married a German girl, and she's still alive. But it's a small world. You think the cycle always goes around, and you always meet years later. It's been interesting. I can still speak pretty good German. Couldn't speak too much Korean, but that was a tough language. George could speak Korean.
How did you do that? I mean, did the military equip you with a way to learn?
Yes. In your indoctrination course, and I'll say this for the military. Every place we went, a young guy in Germany, we had indoctrination courses. This is the country you are in. This is how they act. Don't do this, don't do that. These are the customs and traditions of these people. You get involved, this is what's going to happen. And they give you little booklets. English, German breakdown. I got Japan, it was the same thing. Korea, same thing. You learn from the children. The children are the greatest things in the world. They're the greatest instructors in the world. Yes, they did ask for candy. Yes, you give them, just like your own little brothers and sisters. It wasn't a thing that say, "I got the candy and you haven't." So you're in a position to barter. Sometimes it worked that way for different people, but not us. We in Korea, we even went to the Catholic chaplain who was there 25 years, the same pair of trousers, came from Massachusetts. His name was O'Malley. And he asked us to buy gifts and things for Christmas, for the kids. So it was interesting. There was always a challenge, always something going on. It wasn't just soldiering. It was getting along with each other, learning the culture, seeing who suffered. You saw people who were severely injured. Some of them had been tortured. The younger women in Germany, when I got there, they had been chased by the Russians across the border. They were vicious. They did an awful job on them. So you learn how to live with every type of person there was, and you learn to live with their problems, their sympathies, and sicknesses and ailments, and you become compassionate. So as you get old and mature, you're able to help. But you try to teach young kids as they go up, this is what they run into. They're not exposed to that today, but it does exist. It still goes on every day.
Tell me again about your, I want to say infantry, which I know you know how to identify them better than I
Sure.
do. Where you belonged, and then your ranks, for your highest rank.
Okay, when I was, well, there's an unfortunate task in the Army. Once you're an infantryman, you are an infantryman to the day you die. I'm still an infantryman, but we had armored. I was in Europe. I was an infantryman. I was a little PFC. Then I got promoted to private first class, 1 stripe. The most proud rank of my life was my first stripe. Then I got frozen in rank. This is why I went to officer candidate school. I said, this sergeant is so dumb, it's taking care of me. I'm just as smart as he is. You know what he said? Prove it. And this was my challenge. And I had it, let me tell you, I cried many times. Going to officer candidate school, going to NCO school. Then they made you sergeant. I made sergeant when I went to Officer Candidate School. Then from there, second lieutenant, first lieutenant. And I got out as a first lieutenant, and then the reserve system, I went corporal, or captain, major, lieutenant colonel. And I finished up as a colonel. I've worked on some high levels. In the reserve system, I worked all the way up the Army level, all the way through. I loved the service at the time. I cursed it many times because it was difficult with family. When I was single, there was no problem. But when you're married, it's very difficult. We pulled many duties for the married fellas so they can go home for Christmas and do things like this. You know, why not? They were great people.
When you were in battle, you said you knew you first really.
Mm-hmm.
How would you identify the men you were with? Because you identify them as certain infantry, a certain battalion?
Yeah, well, we had companies of 187 men. Then you were congealed into a battalion, which has like 1,200 people. It's funny that you should bring this up. In Europe, I went to the transition earlier. When I first got to Europe, leftovers from World War II, and I say that the tough sergeants, that they used physical force when they wanted discipline. They didn't talk to you. They called you back to the barracks. It was a fight, just like you would see in the movies. And I was one of 3 high school graduates in a battalion of 1,200 people back in 1949. And the commander was from Albany, New York. It was a Colonel Coffey. I never forgot his name. And it's ironic. I met many commanders over the next 30 years. I met some of the commanders I had at the lowest ranks. And they fought in Vietnam. I went back as an instructor for many years in the reserve program. I taught at Fort Benning. And I had full colonels who were assigned to the military government as advisors for the South Vietnamese. Many of them were relieved because of policy, because they have their own methods of doing everything. They like the Americans for counseling and support and everything else, but they still operate in their own manner. So, but it's been enlightening. I enjoyed it all over the years. I met some of the best, still in touch with some of them. Many of them passed on. They're still going now. So I speak every chance I have an opportunity to talk. I give them a story on just about anything from soup to nuts. Enjoy it.
Your greatest victory while you were in service?
God, I don't know. My greatest victory. I think just surviving. Just plain surviving. I had so many breaks over that 36-year period. Like I say, I could have shipped from Europe as an enlisted man and got killed early. I could have shipped when I went to my different schools and got killed on the different hills. But through the floods, through this and that, and I just blessed. There's certain things, and my greatest thing was get the Combat Infantry Badge, which I never got. It's one of the highest esteemed awards that you can get as an infantryman. And to qualify for that, it'd be 30 days of constant combat. And you have to be assigned to an infantry unit. I was assigned to an amphibious unit, so I could never get that award. It broke my heart, but you know what I said? If God wanted me to have it, He wouldn't have laid all these little breaks for me. He let me know it's not for you, but you're going to live. And here I am today, so I'm thankful for that. And I think that's my greatest thing. It's not luck. It's the way the chips fall. My sorriest thing is losing the many close officers and friends, sergeants and enlisted people and the officers that I had known over all my years to hear that this one was killed, that one was killed. My closest friend was killed in Company D, 7th Division in Korea, 31st Regiment. I can remember getting a first letter back. KIA, big stamp, return to sender. I just say, you're next. But you never look to die. You always figure you're going to go on and on and on. And as an instructor, And I taught for many years, and I've been in leadership many years. As a commander, you have the responsibility of ordering some man to give up his life to accomplish a mission. I never forgot that. I never had to do that. Never had to say, you go out there and you do it, knowing he's never going to come back. It's a hard decision. That's one of the bad things of leadership, but you have to do it. And it's the hardest thing is losing your people. You train them to live, to survive, and live in combat. I never trained my people to die in combat, always to live, to stay alive. So I walk away with all those years thankful. I'm proud of every one of them. I'm not sorry. I have no regrets. I know I gave my all. And if they want them again, as old as I am, I'm ready to go. Nobody wants me, but I'm still ready.
I'm going to ask you one last question.
Sure.
Why is it worth it?
Why is it worth it? Oh, God. I tell you. Well, what can I say? I love my country. I love everything I've been given. It came natural to me. It's been good to me. It was worth every bit of my time, the loneliness, the separation, everything, the camaraderie that was built up among all of us, the things that I've seen in the world. It's a whole experience. It was worth every bit of it. I recommend it, but it's not for everybody. The transition is hard. Today's generation is a little different. But as I say, I defend the American kid. He's got the guts. He can do it. With the right leadership, he's the best. You'll never beat him. Man, knowing I had that support, I never had a turn. Like I say, every day I cried when I used to see the flag up there, bring it down. Patriotism means nothing to some people. To me, it was everything. Because I raised that flag in the morning, and I took it down at night. And boy, and I said, thank God, when this is over with, I'm going back. That's for me. Some people don't see that. I do. Maybe I'm an oddball. I don't know. But that's the way it's been all my life.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, you'll cut all of that away.
My
We're just telling
goodness.
stories.
My
We're just telling
goodness.
stories.
Oh.
Photographs.
Hey, go here, Marc.
You know what? I need to
That's
shake
perfect.
this man's hand. Each of them